Since February 1922, when this country gained independence, it has only had democracy for 368 days. In Egypt, just like in Russia, opposition leaders are tortured, disappear, or fall out of the windows. Protesters are arrested and jailed, and your Facebook post can get you a long sentence. But unlike Russia, Egypt remains the best friend of the EU and the US. Dude, I'm really angry with you. Why? I think we're buddies. You've killed 18 journalists so far. Now you order death penalties for 200 opposition leaders. Come on. I hate lies. I ordered death penalties for 199 opposition, not 200, Sleepy Joe. That's not acceptable, and America will punish you for that. Oh, okay. What's my punishment? I'll send you $5 billion to buy more weapons. According to the US State Department, from 1978 till 2024, the United States has provided Egypt with more than $50 billion in military aid and $30 billion in economic assistance. Despite hundreds of human rights violations, between 1948 and 2011, the US provided more aid and military assistance to Egypt than any other country except Israel. Usually, when a country violates human rights, as Egypt does, the US and EU would stop their governments and companies from investing in such countries, but in the case of Egypt, the opposite is the case. Of all 54 countries in Africa, many of which have democracy, Egypt is the #1 recipient of the EU and US foreign direct investment. So, why? Why did the US and EU send billions of dollars every year to the Egyptian dictator despite his record of human rights abuses? Why is Egypt the #1 destination for European and American investment? Why do the US and EU, people who talk about democracy more often than Kardashians do plastic surgery, still finance authoritarian regimes like Egypt? Let's answer these questions quickly. On page 480 of his 1990 book, The Prize, The Epic Quest for Oil, Money and Power, petroleum business historian Daniel Yegin wrote this about Egypt's Suez Canal. In 1948, the canal abruptly lost its traditional rationale. British control over the canal could no longer be preserved on grounds that it was critical to the defense either of India or of an empire that was being liquidated. And yet, at exactly the same moment, the canal was gaining a new role as the highway not of empire but of oil. By 1955, petroleum accounted for half of the canal's traffic, and in turn, 2/3 of Europe's oil passed through it. Later in this video, I'll talk about this quote, the Suez Canal, and how it contributes to the US's questionable romance with Egyptian dictators. For now, let's wind back the time to 1954. In 1954, the Egyptian government under the leadership of Gamal Abdel Nasser submitted a request asking the World Bank to finance the Aswan High Dam project. The Aswan High Dam project was going to be the biggest and most important project in the history of Egypt. Well, aside from those 5,000-year-old pointy triangles in the desert. An engineering marvel designed in 1952 by this Greek-Egyptian engineer, Aswan High Dam is 364 feet in height, 12,562 feet in crest length, and has a volume of 57,940,000 cubic yards. This dam would help Egypt to control the deadly and often unpredictable Nile flooding, which usually causes widespread damage and loss of life by regulating the river's flow. The dam would also help Egypt increase its agricultural production because it would reclaim about 100,000 acres of desert land and make crops possible on some 800,000 other acres, as the dam water could be used for irrigation. The dam's 12 giant turbines would produce as much as 10 billion kilowatt hours annually, providing a tremendous boost to the Egyptian electricity industry and economy. The dam's reservoir would support a fishing industry, help improve navigation along the Nile River, provide water security, create thousands of jobs, and who knows, maybe the dam would be so damn that it would serve as a goddamn romantic getaway for couples seeking a truly damn good time. Now that I've told you why the dam is so damn good, can you debit your account for it? Sure. In 1955, U.S. Secretary of State John Foster Dulles offered a loan of $270 million for the construction of Egypt's Aswan High Dam. But there was a problem. At the same time, when Egypt was talking to the US about the loan for the Aswan High Dam, Egyptian leaders were also negotiating for arms from the Soviet Union. This is like Ross Geller from Friends trying to be in a relationship with both Rachel Green and Emily Waltham at the same time. It was complicated, but as you'll soon see in this story, this strategy worked perfectly for Egypt in allowing Egyptian authoritarian leaders to do whatever they want and still get America to kiss their ass. Let's see some examples. On September 27, 1955, Egypt secured a major arms deal with Czechoslovakia, which was a Soviet satellite state. This arms deal was worth more than $83 million, and the arms included tanks, MiG-15 fighter planes, heavy bombers, self-propelled guns, armored personnel carriers, artillery equipment, naval vessels, small arms, and munitions. America was furious. Hey man, why are you cheating on me? Yo, gee, I'm not. You're my only boyfriend, I swear. I was told you accepted weapons from that red guy after I promised you $270 million. Oh, that one? I'm just deceiving him. Trust me, it's you I will marry. If you want to marry me, why are you accepting a gift from my enemy? Because he has a bigger rod. Because Egypt accepted weapons from the Soviet Union, America angrily informed Egypt that it was withdrawing its offer to give a $270 million loan for Egypt's dam project. And just when Egypt started crying, the Soviet Union moved closer and embraced her. Stop crying. Stop crying, babe. You know I love you. I will do anything to make you happy. Trust me, whatever that capitalist cowboy promised you, I can do better. In June 1956, for the construction of the Aswan High Dam project, the Soviets offered Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser a loan of $1.12 billion, 4 times the amount America offered at just 2% interest. By 1956, Egyptian authoritarian leaders had understood what my ex-wife told me. No, not that one. Not this one. It's not this one. No, not this. Yeah, okay. One of my ex-wives told me that cheating is good if you do it with 2 rich men. Because the 2 most powerful countries were in love with Egypt, that meant Egypt could always get what she wanted. If the Yankee Yappa wouldn't give Egypt what they wanted, the Red Rascal would most likely give it. But what if Egypt does what is wrong? What if Egypt violates human rights, obstructs international trade, or kills journalists? Would there still be a grace from either the US or the Soviet Union? Well, there's a story to test that. On July 26, 1956, the Egyptian president Gamal Abdel Nasser announced the nationalization of the Suez Canal Company, the joint British-French enterprise which had owned and operated the Suez Canal until 1956. The full story of the Suez Canal and its importance to the world's trade and global politics will be discussed later in this video. For now, we'll just say that the Suez Canal is very important, so important that for nationalizing it, the British, French and Israeli armies invaded Egypt in October and November 1956. The United States did not join in the invasion, but it was surely behind the British, France and Israel until it receives a message from the Red Devil. The Soviet Union announced that if the British, France and Israel did not get the F out of Egypt, it would join the war in support of Egypt. America was like, hey bro, hey bozo, did you see my WhatsApp message? Yeah, but I don't get it. I was just trying to remind you, this is 1956. Yup, I know. I mean, this is not the date we fixed for World War III. Oh, I thought it was 2026 already. Not wanting to start World War III before both of them had enough nukes, the United States under President Eisenhower persuaded actually pressured the British to get out of Egypt by threatening to impose economic sanctions on Britain, including selling off its holdings of British pounds, which would have destabilized the British economy and weakened its currency. By December 22, 1956, British and France troops had shamefully gotten out of Egypt. Earlier in the video, I told you that with the experience of the Aswan High Dam project, Egyptian authoritarian leaders figured that they could always get whatever they wanted, either from the United States or from the Soviet Union. Now, with the experience of the British and French invasion, Egyptian leaders now know that aside from getting what they want, they can also do what they like. By the end of the 1950s, the Soviet Union and the United States were chasing after Egypt like two hungry dogs chasing a bone. For example, the Soviet Union engaged in extensive intelligence gathering and covert operations, including espionage, propaganda, and attempts to influence domestic politics in Egypt. The US is doing the same. America was trying everything to influence Egyptian culture. The Soviet Union was doing the same. The Soviet Union sent billions of dollars of aid to Egypt, focusing on industrial development and infrastructure projects. America sent billions of dollars focusing on agricultural modernization and free market reforms. Egypt would often get weapons from the Soviet Union to fight Israel, then get another set of weapons from the US to fight whoever the US didn't like. You get the idea? Because the two most powerful countries in the world were fighting for the soul of Egypt, it was difficult, if not impossible, to make any Egyptian authoritarian leader of that era accountable for any atrocity. At this point in the video, we have established three facts. First, between the 1950s and 1990s, Egypt was the coveted bride of the two superpowers. Second, Egyptian authoritarian leaders were smart enough to use this as an advantage to get whatever they wanted, either from the US or from the Soviet Union. Third, it's difficult for America to hold any Egyptian authoritarian leader accountable when at the same time the US needs her to marry him. Now, there are two questions you may be asking. First, what's the big deal about Egypt? Why is Egypt so important to the superpowers? Second, since the Soviet Union had fallen, why are the US and EU still simping for an Egyptian authoritarian president? Let's answer those two questions very quickly. Located at the intersection of Africa, Asia, and Europe, the number one reason every superpower wants to be friends with Egypt is due to its strategic position. Egypt's location is crucial for international trade, diplomacy, and military strategy. Earlier in this video, I quoted from this book about the importance of Egypt's Suez Canal. Opened in 1869, after 10 years of work was financed by the French and Egyptian governments, the Suez Canal is a 193.30 kilometer long artificial sea level waterway connecting the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea through the Isthmus of Suez and dividing Africa and Asia, and by extension, the Sinai Peninsula from the rest of Egypt. This canal is a key trade route between Europe and Asia, and it is so important to the world's trade that between 1976 and 2022, as many as 20,600 vessels traverse the canal each year, an average of 56 per day. Egypt's Suez Canal is responsible for approximately 12% of global trade. That is a lot, considering that Egypt is just 1.4% of the world's population. 30% of global container traffic passes through the Suez. Goods worth over $1 trillion are being transported through the canal each year, including about 1 million barrels of oil, 53.5 million tons of ores and metals, and 35.4 million tons of coal. The Suez Canal is to the global economy what the heart is to the human body, and this is particularly true of the European economy. Let me show you why that's the case. Let's say any country in Europe wants to transport some raw materials from Asia. With the Suez Canal, the journey looks like this. This is probably 10,000 or 11,000 kilometers. Trust me, I didn't fact check that from Google. So if some guys with 395 IQ drop negative comments on this video, I know it's my fault. Anyway, without the Suez Canal, the journey looks like this. You have to go around the entirety of Africa. In some cases, the cargo ships have to travel a double distance and spend twice the number of days and fuel, which eventually doubles the cost of transportation and adds to the price of goods and services for European consumers. Among other reasons, the EU and US politicians see the guy who holds the key to the Suez Canal as someone who has to be their friend no matter the number of children he puts in prison. Another reason why Egyptian authoritarian leaders continue to have free passes with the US and EU is Egypt's influence over the Arab world. With 111 million population, Egypt is the most populous Arab nation. Egypt's political orientation often sets the tone for other Arab nations, making it a strategic ally for shaping regional policies. Egypt has traditionally been seen as a leader in the Arab world, influencing political, cultural, and economic trends. Its leadership role was particularly pronounced under President Gamal Abdel Nasser, who championed Arab nationalism and anti-colonialism. By overlooking the atrocities of the Egyptian leaders, the US and the EU can be in the good book of Egypt, and that can help them exert greater influence over the broader Middle East and North Africa MENA region. US and EU relationship with Egypt could mean peace in the Arab world, which could then translate to oil for the United States. It also translates to a good relationship between many Arabs and the first child of the US. You know who I'm talking about, don't you? The Camp David Accords of 1978, brokered by the US, in which Egypt became the first Arab country to recognize Israel, and the Egypt-Israel Peace Treaty of 1979 are good examples of this. Another reason why Egyptian authoritarian leaders could violate human rights and still get billions of dollars of aid and investment from the US and EU is that Egypt's location helped the US and EU countries to project their military might to the rest of the world. The US maintained a significant military presence in Egypt, even though most of the US troops operated under different international coalitions. For example, the US Navy's 5th Fleet operates in the Red Sea, while the EU has also established a military presence in the region, with the European Union Naval Force UNAFOR operating in the Mediterranean. The presence of the US and EU military assets in Egypt helps to secure important sea lanes and ensure quick response capabilities in the region. There are probably a few more reasons why Egyptian authoritarian leaders can violate any international law or disregard human rights and still be good friends of Mr. Democracy. For example, oil. Even though Egypt isn't as oil-rich as Saudi or UAE, it does have a significant oil reserve that may be useful for US oil diversification. The discovery of the Zohr gas field in 2015, one of the largest in the Mediterranean, has further enhanced Egypt's role in the energy sector. Plus, millions of barrels of oil depend on Egypt's Suez Canal to get to Europe or America every day. In 2023, Freedom House rates Egypt with 18 points out of 100 points on a global freedom scale. Any country with a rating below 41 is generally considered not free. That means Egypt is in the same category as Venezuela, which is rated 15 out of 100, Iran, which is rated 11 out of 100, or Russia, which is rated 13 out of 100. However, unlike all these other authoritarian states, Egypt is literally being financed by the gods of democracy, the US and the EU. In the first part of this video, I explained how the US and Soviet rivalry puts Egypt in the position of the most beautiful bride. To understand Egypt's geopolitical strategy during this era, imagine this bald man and this former bald man desperately want to marry this girl. This girl understands their desperation, so she starts using them. If she needs a Ferrari, for example, she can go to the Prime Minister. If the Prime Minister refuses her request, she can go to the ex-Terminator. If she misbehaves and the shopping sultan wants to punish her, she can always get the Electric Emperor to plan her escape. Hopefully they will not use the Cybertruck or they get stuck in the mud. That was the game Egypt played till the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991. But even after then, countries in the EU and the United States still needed Egypt. Its Suez Canal powers the world's trade. Its location is strategically important to the war-thirsty Mr. Sam, and its influence on the Arab world is needed to get the Arabs to cooperate with the US agenda, no matter what that is. If you think I misrepresented some facts in this video or left out some important points, I would like to read your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks.